Welcome to Right on the Mark with your host, Mark Young. Today we're going to talk about jobs through the years. Jobcast podcast, if you will. Probably all started back in the early 80s, cutting grass just around the neighborhood. A lot of yards around the neighborhood, a lot of people looking for grass to be cut. In fact, it was very hard to keep up with the demand. You actually had to cut one grass, move on to the next one, cut one grass, move on to the next one. I started with mine. Mine was always tough. The house that I grew up in, just due to the front yard, side yard, and the backyard was pretty big. Front yard wasn't as level as the backyard, so I used to cut the grass in shifts. Basically, the first morning I would cut the front end of the house, and then later that day I would cut the back end of the house just to split it up to make it a little easier. But there was other yards that I cut in the neighborhood. There was some where I had to drive to cut, somewhere out of Monessen, somewhere in Bell Vernon, somewhere in the Sweeney plan. I had a cool little gig cutting for a judge in a Sweeney plan. That was always nice. He paid me pretty handsomely. Good guy. Then there was always the odd jobs. There was, I'd say back in the day, you'd get paid per hour. I think they were paying like $4 an hour to cut grass. And then I moved to how much per yard. I moved to $20 per yard. I thought $4, $5 an hour wasn't enough. So I just started to bid out, $20, $30 per yard. And that way I made a little bit more money, and it seemed to work out better because I wasn't always watching the clock. After that, I did some other jobs in the off season as well, because I was still in high school or shortly after high school. While I was in college, I did some odd jobs. I mean, there was some tennis court coverage that they needed. So I would work for the Monessen High School. I guess it was the Monessen High School Public School District where they employed me as a tennis instructor. So I was in charge of the tennis courts down in Monessen, which was kind of funny. Also, I did a little bit of softball and baseball umpiring as well. There was, I think we got paid $10 a game or something like that. And, back then, $10, hey, that'd fill up your tank of gas. So you were good for the week. Yeah, back then, that's all you worried about was how far you can get on gas. I mean, I remember when gas went up to 80 cents a gallon, everyone was in an uproar. They're like, oh, no, we can't go anywhere. It's 80 cents a gallon. I remember one of my other friends, Vince, he would yell at me, we're not riding around on 80 cents a gallon. And he's like, we're going to go do what we have to do and get back. That just seems kind of crazy now when gas is over $3 a gallon here in Western Pennsylvania, but I think that's highest in the country due to some Western Pennsylvania law or something like that. But I remember that happening. Those were good times, though. I mean, you always got to see your friends. Everybody was watching the game or either playing in the game, so I got to interact with the players, the coaches, the other umpires with myself, plus get paid. I mean, I was going to be at the game anyway, watching it, so why not just call balls and strikes and out or safe whenever you're running the bases and get paid for it? I mean, might as well do that than sit in the bleachers. But there was, 6 or 8 of us that rotated games up at Topfield City Park. And, $10 a game wasn't too bad. From there, I moved on to other odd jobs. I remember working at 84 Produce. I think it was called 84 Produce on Route 88 in Charleroi. Kitty and Nancy was in charge of that. And I would make produce runs for them. So once a day in the morning, I'd make a produce run. It was in Bell Vernon somewhere. I'd go to the dock and have my had my order list ready that Kitty gave me, and I'd go pick up the produce and deliver to 84 Produce. So that was kind of neat. That was kind of a fun job. I mean, I was basically driving a truck, picking up produce, unloading it, loading stuff back on, sending the returns back, or whatever Kitty and Nancy needed at the store. I did. They had a lottery machine there. They had a lot of produce, candy, stuff like that. So I just stocked the shelves and kind of just BS'd around there and had a good time. That didn't last long. Kitty wasn't in business that long. From what I remember, maybe I was there 6 months or so. I'm not sure how long the stand was there. The 84 produce stand might have been there only a couple years, but I do remember that. There was times when I worked at Shop and Save. They had Shop and Save back in Belle Vernon in the day, and it seemed like everybody worked at a supermarket back then. I mean, you in between your grades at school, like if you were going to 10th to 11th grade, 11th to 12th, you just worked at Shop and Save, or as some people called it, Slop and Save. Because they really treated you bad. But I was a stock boy there, and I did errands for them, collected carts, made runs to other grocery stores that the owner had me do to grab products and bring it back and things like that. Run the pallet jack and just clean up the back room and bag groceries. I could say I never was a cashier. But I collected the carts, bagged groceries, stock boy, ran a pallet jack, stocked the shelves, did a lot of odds and ends at Shop and Save. And, I'd work full shifts sometimes, half a shifts sometimes, some weekend work. And, I did some midnight shift. The trucks would come in the middle of the night. And that's when you stock the grocery shelves, is the middle of the night, because that's when you want to do it, when nobody's in the store. Nowadays, I'll walk through the market and I'll see people stocking shelves at noon. That was unacceptable back in the day. Angie and some of those other store owners, they wouldn't let you stock the shelves at noon. That was like prime time for people shopping. You want to stay out of their way. Let them get what they need, get out, so the more people can get in. But now people just stock the shelves around the clock. So I don't know if it's needed or if people just don't like to work the midnight shift or the overnight shift, and they just decide to work the daylight shift and just stock all day long. And I noticed they're a lot slower now. So a lot of the people I talk at the supermarkets, especially at Giant Eagle, they've been there 20, 25 years, and they love it. They do their thing. They stock their dairy, they stock their produce, and they just mosey on along, and they just work their 8 hours or whatever, and then they're done and they come back. So, a lot of them are really friendly, but that's how I guess that was probably one of my first real jobs, real paying jobs. I mean, the other jobs paid. I think whenever I was a tennis instructor, I made like $2.50 an hour. Whenever I worked at the supermarket, I think I made $3.35 an hour. That might have been the minimum wage. $3.35. That's pretty crazy. And then Shop and Save didn't last long there. After that, they were bought out. Giant Eagle came in and things like that. But they had a lot of job openings at other food markets as well. I mean, I remember reading in the paper, Crossroads Food Mart. Back then, you had to read the paper for the want ads to see if you wanted to change jobs. There was no internet. There was no looking on your phone. There was no Indeed where all the jobs come to your phone. It was just basically you waited for the Sunday paper to come, you look for the jobs, and then you went out to apply. That was about it. Once in a while, you'd get a hint from somebody, I don't know, a neighbor or a friend of a friend that says, hey, this place is hiring. But you'd never knew if there was a job out there. I mean, heck, how would you know if there's a job at the airport if I live an hour away in Monessen? You're just not going to know that unless somebody works there and tells you, or it's in the paper. It's not going to come to your phone like nowadays, like, oh, we need an agent, or we need a staffing at the, luggage collection area, something like that. You're not going to know that, but now you can with today's internet connection. So that's definitely a huge tool nowadays to get a job. But so I did work at Crossroads Food Mart. It was Gutman owned. Back in the day, Gutman was really big. I think they're still out there, as a matter of fact, but they were based in Spears, and they ran their own grocery store, a small convenience store, I'll say, not a grocery store. It was a 24-hour market where you could get anything you want in a convenience. I know 7-Eleven was out there, but they were basically open from 7 a.m. to 11. Crossroads, Sheetz, I think they started it all, and that's when they were open 24/7. So which was really crazy to me, because I'm thinking, who would stay up all night just to work? But turns out it was me. I remember applying there, and they hired me, and the shift differential for working the midnight shift was like a dime more. So I'm like, sign me up. I'll make 10 cents more an hour, which sounds crazy. But so I'd work 11 to 7. and with the graveyard shift basically. And you had your steady people come in, you had your policemen, you had your ambulance workers, you had your hospital workers. You had the clientele was a little different because you had the bars closing at 2 a.m. and people coming in for their snacks and their munches and whatever they want. We didn't sell alcohol back in the 80s at the store, so it wasn't that bad. But, every once in a while you get a long line and you're the only one in the store and somebody wants deli. Yeah, I can remember having a long line and somebody would stand in and say, "Hey, can I get a pound of lunch meat? Give me a pound of shaved ham or chipped ham and a pound of cheese, chick." That's pretty funny. So I'd have to stop the line and go run the deli slicer and then come back in line. Oh man, I can remember somebody yelling at me because I didn't wash my hands, which I totally forgot because I was trying to get people in and out of the door. So he's like, "No, chop it again and wash your hands this time." Oh, that's all part of learning the job. I mean, heck, I was just late teenagers, early 20, just figuring all this stuff out on how to get a job and how to get paid. But with that, they didn't pay very well. So I did find out that a Giant Eagle store new Giant Eagle store was opening up in Bell Vernon. As a matter of fact, the same place where I worked at Shop and Save, it was opening a Giant Eagle. So I left Crossroads Food Mart after being, the night. I'll say I worked the midnight shift and I worked my way up to assistant manager. And I think assistant manager was like 50 cents more an hour, which really wasn't worth it. You had to do all this work. You were in charge of the schedule. You were in charge of the people. Then you had to cover people if the employees called off or didn't come in or they just quit. So I'm like, this is nothing. I says, this isn't for me, is what I meant to say. This isn't for me. I can't do this. I want something where I can know where I'm gonna end, know where I'm gonna start, and know where I'm gonna end. That's just crazy to come in, at any time, any of the days. So I didn't really like that. So I got out of that. I quit that. I think I was making $3.75 an hour as an assistant manager at Crossroads Food Mart. I think they're out of business now. But they were really tight on the wallet, if you know what I mean. They just didn't pay. So Giant Eagle, the new Giant Eagle was opening up, but before it opened, I worked at the Sweeney's one, the one over there by Peasant Village in Bell Vernon. It was called I think it was called the Sweeney's Plaza. There was a strip mall. It was connected to a strip mall. There was like Fox's Pizza Den there. There was some other offices. There was a small deli, and then you had Giant Eagle. But I basically just worked there for a year or so, just until the new one opened, the brand new Tri-County Plaza Giant Eagle, owned and operated by Angie. And he seemed to treat his employees a little bit better, but not everyone. There was a lot of, I want to say, animosity within Giant Eagle just due to the departments. I don't think they paid everyone the same. So if you worked at the deli, you were the deli manager. You were the meat manager. If you were the produce manager, everyone made different amounts of money, from what I understand, from what the rumors were. So people had a lot of animosity against each other. So I'm not sure how that went. But when I started out there, I started with the stock boy. I started with the carts. I started, basically packing all the groceries, bagging them and stuff. Then I worked my way up to dairy manager. Oh yes, as the lovely Kim would call me, the dairy fairy. Yeah, to this day she still laughs at that. And I was in charge of the dairy, so my sole job of the day was to make sure we didn't run out of milk, egg, cheese, and whatever yogurt ran fast or whatever was the best selling. So that was my job back at Giant Eagle. I mean, there was a lot of other odd jobs I did in between that. I mean, I still cut grass in between that. But, after that, I really wanted to up my game. I wanted to up my game a little bit more, saying, this grocery business isn't for me. I mean, I was in it for a couple years and really wasn't making that much. And, just doing the same thing. And I'm like, I don't know how these people stay here for 20 to 30 years. I'm like, I got to try something else. And I jumped into the selling business. So it was probably the late 80s. I jumped into selling furniture and mattresses. believe it or not. If I could remember, it was in the Strip District. I think it was on Smallman Street. It was called American Federal Warehouse. And that's exactly how they wanted you to answer the phone. American Federal Warehouse, how can I help you? It's almost like the Crazy Eddie of the days. Like they wanted you to just be really upbeat on the phone and just like say something crazy to make them buy furniture or mattresses. That's kind of funny because, Crazy Eddie was a TV commercial back in the 70s or early 80s, and he just came on. And I think he sold like stereos and like televisions and radios and stuff like that. And he was known as Crazy Eddie. Come to Crazy Eddie's and buy all this, stereo equipment and TVs and electronics. It was something else. But that's how they wanted us to answer the phone. So that got old after a while. I mean, people would come in and look at furniture, look at mattresses, and some would buy, and most did not. So once again, I'm like, well, maybe this isn't it for me. So I'm like, I still like sales, not too bad. Let me get into some telemarketing sales. So that's a whole new ball game. I mean, I was able to answer phones and try to sell them stuff over the phone. It wasn't cold calling as much as it was, I'll say postcard mailing where people called you. So I guess the owners would flood the market, a certain section, a sector in the United States that would get mail. So mail would be delivered in a postcard saying you won one of 3 prizes. One was a gold chain, one was a trip to Hawaii, and one was a car. So we got them to call in and, everybody won one of those gold chains. Nobody won the Hawaii trip. Nobody won the car. Everyone won the gold bracelet. And of course you had to buy the product to win it. And when I saw the gold product, the gold chain, maybe it was $20, wasn't very nice. It looked a lot nicer than what it actually was. But on the postcard, people at least called in and you try to sell them water purification. And I'd get some phone calls in there where people would be like, all right, which boiler room are you working at now? Nobody believed in the telemarketing back then, but, everybody was trying to get a piece of the action. I mean, it was a multi-billion dollar business back in the day. A lot of people just try to scam you. I'm not saying this was a scam because I believe in water purification. In fact, I have one now. I bought one from that company. And then when I got my own house, I actually put a water softener in, water conditioner in, and purifier. So I definitely believe in it. So I didn't mind selling it. I was always into water just because I like the beach and the ocean so much. So I'm like, why not sell water? So the water purification went on for a few years and I made a lot of sales, and which was pretty cool. Was you got a weekly salary plus you got spiffs. So if you sold 5 water purifiers, and I think they were $400. They were just a mobile tap that you hooked up to your main water line, I think it was, and just purified the water, didn't soften it. But, I think you got $10 a sell. So if you made 5 sells, you hit what they called the spiff. So that was $50 a day. Plus, I think I made $250 a week. So back then, that was pretty good money. They didn't take the taxes out. We were in charge of doing our own taxes. But, I think I made a decent amount of money until we got shut down. Yes. Somebody must have called us in, and one day we came in right after the new year, and somebody stormed in through the door and said, "Phones down, FBI." And they ripped all the cords, all the phone lines, all the jacks out of the wall and just shut us down. And then they interviewed us one by one to see what we were doing. So, I truly was selling water purifiers. So I'm not sure what was happening behind the scenes or what was going on, what the owners were doing. But I had no knowledge of that, so I had plausible deniability. So there was no reason for me to panic. I'm just trying to sell water softeners over the phone. And I remember one FBI agent going, "Wow, you truly don't know what's going on here, do you?" And to this day, I don't actually know what was going on behind the scenes. All I know is I thought it was a legit telemarketing place, but I'm guessing it wasn't. So who knows what they were running behind the scenes. After all that, I took a long, hard look at it, and I'm like, you know what? I think I have to go back to school. Back to school in a sense, we're not a 4-year college degree or not a associate's, but I think I'm going to try something that takes the least amount of time that could get me certified in something where I can make a decent amount of money, at least $10 an hour. I mean, 15 would be ideal, but 10 to 12 bucks an hour would be good, back. And this was probably in the late 80s, just the turn of the 90s. And so after I lost my job at the telemarketing, I went back to school, and the lovely Kim did support me. She actually worked 2 jobs so I can go back to school. So that is definitely why she is the love of my life. She definitely supported me in a lot of my shenanigans that I pulled trying to get jobs, just trying to get ahead. But she knew I always meant well. It just didn't turn out as well because I always thought the next job was the next big thing. But, she always supported me, and she obviously did when she took on 2 jobs to support us. And we were still living at the townhouse then. We didn't have any kids. We were married, but I'm like, let's do this now and get it over with. So I think it was a 9-month or 12-month course where I was going to take up pharmacy technician. So they had this school called Western School of Health and Business, and I took up pharmacy tech. And a lot of people ask me, why did you choose pharmacy to, as a living? Because I'm still in the pharmacy now. And, one thing growing up is I always liked money and I always liked pills. As a kid, as a teenager, I remember taking suntan pills. I was working the midnight shift at Crossroads, and I'm thinking, all of my friends have tans because they're at the Elks, and I'm home sleeping because I'm working the midnight shift, and I have to sleep during the day when they're all at the Elks suntanning. So I'm like, I saw an ad at the back of a magazine, probably a wrestling magazine, that said suntan pills. Suntan without the sun. And I'm like, perfect. So let me tell you, it didn't work. I think it made my skin turn a little orange, as a matter of fact. But so that's how I kind of liked getting into pharmacy was, I was always into vitamins and minerals and something to make you stronger. I was one of those guys that would drink those shakes, those power shakes, and, whatever supplement can to enhance your ability is what I was thinking. And plus, I wanted to make some money. So I did go to that school, Western School, for a couple, might have been just a year. And I came out certified pharmacy technician, and which was really cool because I was able to work at any pharmacy I wanted to. So I could have worked retail, I could work specialty, I could work hospital, I could work IVs, the intravenous room. I could do all that stuff, and it was up to my choice. So obviously, I went with whoever paid the most. And back then, UPMC paid the most, but I couldn't get in. I was on the waiting list. Back then, benefits were paid for you. I think there was a pension back then. 401ks were matching big time, like 6 or 7%. But I was on the wait list. I didn't get in there. So what happened was I ended up going to Washington Hospital. I did an externship there at Washington Hospital, and I kind of liked it. It was really right around the turn of the faxes, whenever we started faxing prescriptions, and we got away from the hard copies. So, so that was kind of new. I mean, I was learning the new fax machine. I was learning how to take prescriptions at the hospital. And, everyone visits the hospital, whether you're in there because you're sick or, a family member. So I would always see somebody I knew. And plus, some people work there. Like Lenny and Brenda that I went to school with. So, that was kind of cool. I didn't mind going there. But then when UPMC called about a year or two later, I ended up joining them. So that was pretty cool. I mean, I worked for UPMC, and they were all over the place. They still are, as a matter of fact. I mean, I worked at Montefiore, Presby, Southside Apothecary. There was a satellite in Bridgeville. They had a long-term care pharmacy in Bridgeville. They had a specialty pharmacy at UPMC. It only lasted a couple years because they decided to sell off. But I've worked at a lot of the satellite offices around the city, and I climbed the ladder. After 17 years, I really hit the ceiling and maxed out at my salary. So it was really good. Benefits were good, but once again, I want to up my game. So I decided to leave UPMC after 17 long years. And I went to McKesson Specialty. So they're very, very well known and highly respected. Corporate offices in San Francisco. They've been around for hundreds and hundreds of years, and they just have their hands in everything. I mean, they have it in drugs, they have it in medical devices, they have it in supplies, they have it in gloves and paper towels, and you name it. They just deliver everything. IV products as well. They just have their hands in everything. So very well known. So they started a new sector. It was McKesson Specialty Pharmacy. So I kind of got involved in that. The coolest thing about that was I worked in Pittsburgh on Washington's Landing, and that was a really nice office. I didn't like driving down into traffic, but I did love working at Washington's Landing. I mean, they had a walking trail, a running trail, and you were on an island basically with a bunch of high-end units, high-end, like I'll say housing units in townhouses. Plus, it was business districts. So there's a lot of high-end businesses that worked on that island. So I felt privileged that I got that job, was able to work there. And then we got bought out there. So Walgreens bought us out at McKesson, and McKesson sold their specialty part to Walgreens. And to this day, Walgreens has sold a couple other different times. I think they're called Alliance RX now. But after that, that was probably about, I started McKesson about 2007, and that lasted till about 2012, somewhere around there. And I saw this new job posting. It was called Alexa RX, on-site dispensing system. I'm like, what in the world is that? An on-site dispensing system? Well, here I found out it's a robot. It's a robot that you put in nursing homes that delivers medications. Now, not in the sense of delivering, walking up and down the halls like a robot and passing meds, but in a sense of just dropping the pills to come out of the machine so the nurse could dispense them. That was the on-site dispensing system that they were into, and I really enjoyed that. You know, I had quite a number of jobs within there. I mean, there was pharmacy service technicians, there was implementation technicians, there's order entry, production. There was just so many jobs within that. But I went in as an implementation technician. So in 2012, I turned a new chapter where I turned into be a traveling pharmacy technician, which which was unheard of back when this all started back in the 70s and 80s. Like, there was no traveling pharmacy technician. Back then, all you did was stand on a counter and count pills. That was it. But now I applied for this job where I'm going to travel and I'm going to implement these robots into all these nursing homes across the country. So if you think about that, I probably was involved in probably 200 to 300 implementations across the country in the last 6 years that I was a part of, that we delivered meds to. So to this day, I go back and I'll see some of those homes when I visit them, because that is my current job right now. I still do work for Alexa RX. I go back and I reminisce on how hard it was to implement that home, but I see a success story every time I go in because they are thriving. They are doing well. You know, I started out as an implementation technician there. Did some work with a boss where I was a pharmacy service technician. Then I applied for a pharmacy operations technician. So I actually worked for corporate for a couple years, 2 solid years, as a matter of fact. Same company, Alexa RX, but the corporate office is in Plano, Texas. So I worked for them, which I really, really loved. I worked, Monday through Friday, corporate job, corporate hours. I mean, I was on call around the clock, but hey, that wasn't bad. I mean, I kind of enjoyed that. It really challenged me, and I learned a lot. I will say that. I learned a ton working for pharmacy ops. But right now, I actually got a promotion. So as of June, I got promoted to a PST supervisor. So that is a pharmacy technician supervisor position. Good friend of mine, Gina, retired, and I applied for her job. And she recommended me, and she's like, Mark, I think you should throw your hat in the ring. I think you'd be a great supervisor. And I said, Gina, I think you're right. So I did throw my hat in the ring, and we had some interviews. And to this day, I'm still a PST supervisor and loving every minute of it. Well, that about does it for Right on the Mark with your host, Mark Young. Remember to like, subscribe, and tap the bell. See you next time.